David stood frozen at the courthouse steps as his son-in-law, Mark, punched him across the jaw and shouted, "You old fool. You're a disgrace to this family." The sound echoed through the morning air like a gunshot as people turned to stare at them with wide eyes and shocked faces. His daughter, Anna, stood beside her husband with her head down, too ashamed or too afraid to speak a single word. David did not respond or raise a hand because he knew anger only fed men like Mark and made them louder. Instead, he calmly straightened his glasses and walked past both of them without saying a word. And as their faces turned pale, he opened the courthouse door and took his seat quietly inside the jury box. Earlier that week, David had been sitting inside a busy barbecue restaurant when Mark tried to convince him to invest in what he called a life-changing opportunity. Mark kept tapping the menu with nervous fingers as he repeated, "$50,000 gets you in, Dad. It's a sure win." The smell of smoked brisket filled the room, but all David noticed was how often Mark scratched his nose whenever he mentioned money. After 35 years of studying liars for a living, David knew nose-touching meant someone was hiding the truth. "It's a residential project in Cedar Park," Mark continued. "Luxury homes, smart systems, big returns." But David looked him straight in the eyes and said flatly no. Mark blinked fast, confused, then angry. "What do you mean no? You haven't even heard the whole plan," he snapped as his voice rose enough to make the couple at the next table look over. Anna finally lifted her eyes, and David saw a mixture of apology and fear resting in them like shadows. "Dad, the renovation is expensive," she whispered, "and we really need help." David kept his tone calm and steady as he said, "Anna, you remodeled that kitchen last year. I helped pick the tiles." Mark leaned back in his chair with a loud scoff and said, "That was the old kitchen. We're expanding. Anna deserves nice things, unlike you who settled for a small house and a Honda." David placed his napkin softly on the table, showing no anger though his heart tightened at Mark's insults. "Mark," he said quietly, "I've spent my whole life reading liars, and you're not even in the top 100. The nose touching, the shifting eyes, the fake confidence, they're all signs." Mark's face turned red as smoke rose from his collar, but David continued calmly. "Casper, the man you claim is your partner, ran a Ponzi scheme 2 years ago. I read the court files while you went to the restroom." Mark's mouth fell open as David added, "And the building permits you bragged about? They don't exist anywhere in Cedar Park records." Anna's face turned white, and her fork slipped from her fingers as David stood up to leave the table. Mark slammed his fist down again and shouted, "You've always been nothing. You hear me? Nothing." But David walked away slowly, refusing to let Mark's words sink into his spirit or disturb his peace. Outside, he sat in his car with trembling hands, the first sign that the mask of calmness had started to crack. His phone buzzed, and when he checked it, he saw a message from his son Peter, asking, "Dad, please tell me you said no to Mark. I found something dangerous about him." David stared at the screen as a cold realization washed over him. This was only the beginning. David sat silently in his old Honda as families walked in and out of the restaurant, laughing and carrying takeout bags. His phone buzzed again with another message from Peter saying, "Dad, call me now. It's serious." When he finally dialed, Peter answered on the first ring, speaking fast over the sound of office chatter. "Dad, Mark is under investigation for real estate fraud. My friend at the DA's office confirmed it. His company is fake, and he's been taking money from people." David closed his eyes as the truth settled on him like heavy dust. "I didn't give him a cent," he said quietly. Peter sighed with relief and whispered, "Good. Please stay far away from him." The drive home felt longer than usual as David replayed Mark's insults and Anna's silence in his mind. His small yellow house on East 12th Street looked tired but familiar, the paint peeling slightly at the edges like an old memory refusing to fade. Inside, he placed his keys in the ceramic bowl his late wife once used, feeling the absence of her warmth more sharply than ever. He opened his laptop and searched county court records, his fingers moving slowly but purposefully across the keyboard. In minutes, he found the case. 14 victims, nearly $900,000 stolen. Every detail pointed straight at Mark and his partner. So it was all a lie, David whispered to himself. That night, David stayed awake until midnight reading through depositions, bank statements, and victim reports. Each page revealed more about Mark's lies, from photoshopped permits to fake company documents that looked real only from a distance. The next morning, David walked outside in his robe to collect his mail, expecting only bills and flyers. Instead, he found a white envelope from the county jury office with his name written neatly on the front. He frowned as he opened it, reading the date twice to be sure. March 19th. Jury duty. As he stared at the paper, his phone rang. It was an old colleague from the legal world. "David, it's Ben," the familiar voice said warmly. "Long time no talk. Retirement treating you well?" David managed a small smile as he replied, "Can't complain, Ben. What's new?" Ben hesitated, then said, "Funny thing. I'm handling a fraud case next week. Defendant named Mark Burton." Thought the name might ring a bell. David's grip tightened on the phone, but he forced his voice to stay calm. "Is that so?" Ben continued, "Yep. Trial starts on March 19th. Should be straightforward. We have strong evidence." David looked down at his jury summons again, realizing the date matched perfectly. The universe, it seemed, was writing its own script. After the call ended, David sat alone at his kitchen table, staring at the jury summons with a mixture of disbelief and dark understanding. "There's no way this is coincidence," he whispered to himself. His neighbor Patty texted moments later saying she saw the envelope and laughed, "Welcome to jury duty hell, David." He typed back a short response, but his mind was already racing ahead. If he answered one question honestly, "Do you know the defendant?" he would be removed before the trial even began. But if he hid the truth, the entire case would fall under his watch. As he stared at the blank form, a slow, calculating smile formed on his face. "Let's see how far this goes." David spent the next 3 days studying his old jury consulting notes, flipping through binders filled with strategies he once taught attorneys. He knew exactly how to blend into a jury panel: quiet, middle-aged, cooperative, and forgettable. Patty's words echoed in his mind: "Be boring. Boring people get selected." On the morning of jury duty, he dressed in simple khaki pants and a faded blue shirt, the kind that drew no attention. As he walked into the courthouse parking garage, his phone buzzed with a reminder to bring his ID. But he wasn't thinking about documents, he was thinking about justice. A very specific justice. When David reached the courthouse steps, he spotted Mark standing with a tall man in a navy suit who appeared to be his lawyer. Mark's eyes widened the moment he recognized him. "You followed me?" he snapped, stepping forward with a voice sharp enough to cut glass. David remained calm. "Civic duty, Mark. I was summoned like everyone else." Mark laughed nervously and said, "This is hilarious. You won't get anywhere near my trial." But when David showed his summons to security and walked inside, he noticed Mark's face drain of color. For the first time, Mark seemed genuinely afraid. Inside the jury assembly room, David sat among 60 other potential jurors. Most scrolled their phones or sighed loudly at the idea of losing a day to civic responsibility. David sat perfectly straight, hands resting on his knee, looking like a retired man with no strong opinions. When the clerk called Panel B for courtroom 3C, David rose with the group and walked down the hallway with steady, measured steps. The courtroom doors opened, revealing Judge Helen Patterson, stern eyes, calm posture, and a reputation for fairness. David took a quiet breath. "Showtime," he whispered under his breath. Once voir dire began, David answered every question with gentle, neutral confidence. When the prosecutor asked about his career, he replied, "I was a legal researcher. Mostly behind-the-scenes work." When the defense attorney asked whether he trusted law enforcement, he answered, "I trust evidence more than opinions." Mark sat at the table, watching David with increasing panic as the panel dwindled. When the clerk finally read, "Juror number 47, David Harper, please take seat 4, Mark looked like the ground had opened beneath him. David walked into the jury box without breaking eye contact. Nothing needed to be said. The message was already delivered. After jury selection, David stepped into the hallway for a short break. Anna appeared, her eyes red from crying. "Dad, please," she whispered, reaching for his arm. "We need to talk." David shook his head gently. "I can't. The judge said we're not allowed to discuss the case." Anna wiped her cheeks and whispered, "I'm not talking about the case. I'm talking about us." But David stepped back and said softly, "Anna, you chose silence when your husband hit me. That silence still speaks." She covered her mouth as tears rolled down her face. David walked away, leaving her trembling in the hallway. Opening statements began after lunch. The prosecutor stood tall and confident as he addressed the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about deception and greed. The defendant, Mark Burton, created a false real estate empire designed to steal from hard-working families. David watched Mark flinch with every sentence. The prosecutor displayed photos of fake permits, false company logos, and bank transfers flowing directly into Mark's personal accounts. He promised luxury homes, the prosecutor continued, but delivered lies. David took careful notes, but the truth was already crystal clear. The evidence spoke louder than anything he could say. Victims took the stand one by one: an elderly couple who lost their life savings, a young mother who invested her emergency fund, and a teacher who trusted Mark because he claimed family connections. Each testimony cut deeper than the last, painting a picture of manipulation that was impossible to ignore. David noticed every micro-expression on Mark's face: shifting eyes, stiff jaw, restless fingers. When the prosecutor presented emails Mark had sent promising guaranteed returns, Mark whispered angrily to his lawyer, "This is out of context." But no whisper could change truth. It was unfolding for the entire courtroom to see. During the afternoon recess, David walked past a half-open door and heard Mark arguing with his lawyer. "Why didn't you get him removed?" Mark hissed. "He's my father-in-law." The lawyer replied sharply, "You didn't tell me that until after selection. If I bring it up now, the judge will ask why. Do you want her to know you assaulted him outside the courthouse?" Mark fell silent, breathing hard. "He's here for revenge," Mark said. "He wants me destroyed." The lawyer shot back, "He doesn't need revenge. The evidence alone is enough." David stepped away from the door, expression unreadable. By the end of the day, Mark looked worn out and beaten. His tie hung loose, and his hands trembled as he shuffled papers. When court dismissed, David walked out quietly toward the parking garage. Suddenly, Mark appeared from behind a pillar and blocked his path. "You think you're clever," he spat. "You think you can decide my fate?" David didn't flinch. "Your fate is in the evidence, Mark. Not me." Mark's voice lowered to a growl. "If I go down, Anna goes down with me. She spent the money too." David's eyes hardened. "Then she'll have to face the truth. Just like you." That night, David sat in his small living room, the quiet pressing against him like a heavy blanket. He replayed Mark's threat in his mind, feeling the weight of it settle deep into his chest. He knew the trial was moving toward a breaking point, and soon everything would come crashing down. Mark's lies, Anna's choices, and perhaps even David's own control over the situation. As he prepared for the next day in court, he whispered to the empty room, "This ends soon." Outside his window, the night felt thick, restless, and full of unfinished stories waiting to be resolved. David knew the conclusion was close. The next morning, David arrived early at the courthouse, hoping for a quiet moment before testimony resumed. But as he walked through the main corridor, he spotted Anna sitting alone on a wooden bench. Her hair was uncombed, and her hands shook slightly as she clutched her purse. "Dad," she whispered, standing up slowly. "Please. I need to tell you something." David paused, keeping his voice neutral. "Anna, we cannot talk about the case." She shook her head quickly. "It's not the case. It's about Mark. Dad, I'm leaving him." David felt something shift inside his chest, but he said nothing. Anna took a shaky breath and added, "I should have left him sooner." In the courtroom, Mark appeared even more fragile, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. The prosecutor called a title company specialist to the stand, a woman named Ms. Turner who spoke with crisp confidence. She presented forged documents that Mark had submitted, including a fake transfer deed for a small yellow house on East 12th Street. David's heart dropped the moment his address flashed across the screen. Ms. Turner continued, "This signature was traced. The handwriting shows hesitation marks consistent with forgery." Mark shifted in his chair, suddenly sweating. David sat still, but inside, his pulse hammered. Mark had tried to steal his home long before jury duty began. During recess, the prosecutor approached David discreetly near the hallway water fountain. "Mr. Harper," he said softly, "we need to talk." David's jaw tightened, but he nodded. In a small side room, the prosecutor laid the forged deed on the table. "This concerns your property," he explained. "We didn't know you were a victim when you were selected for the jury. You should have been removed." David swallowed hard. "I didn't know about the deed until Ms. Turner showed it." The prosecutor looked at him with narrow, calculating eyes. "We'll let the trial finish. The evidence is overwhelming. But after this, there will be discussions." David nodded slowly, knowing the truth couldn't stay hidden forever. Back in the courtroom, Mark took the stand against his lawyer's obvious advice. He adjusted his tie shakily as he swore to tell the truth, though truth had never been his strong suit. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mark began, trying to steady his voice, "I never meant to hurt anyone. I was misled by my partner. I believed everything was legitimate." The prosecutor stepped forward. "Mr. Burton, did you or did you not use investor funds for personal expenses?" Mark hesitated. I used some of it, yes, but I intended to pay it back." The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. "With what?" "From projects that didn't exist." Mark stammered, unable to answer. The prosecutor then displayed a text message on the projector, showing Mark telling his partner, "Keep the old man's house transfer quiet until we liquidate." David froze as the room fell silent. "Mr. Burton," the prosecutor said, "who is the old man you referred to here?" Mark swallowed hard. I misspoke. Wrong address." The prosecutor stepped closer. "The address matches Mr. Harper's house exactly. So tell the jury, were you planning to take his property?" Mark's voice cracked. "No. I wouldn't do that to family." David felt Anna's eyes on him from the gallery, her breath caught in her throat. The truth was no longer hiding, it was center stage. That evening, David walked toward the parking garage with heavy steps. The sky was fading into a deep orange, and the weight of the week pressed down harder with each breath. As he opened his car door, he heard rapid footsteps behind him. Mark called out, "David, wait." Against his better judgment, David turned. Mark stood panting, his tie crooked, his eyes wild. "You have to understand," Mark begged, "I was under pressure. Casper pushed me into everything." David shook his head slowly. "You targeted me months ago, Mark. You forged my signature." Mark stepped closer. "I can fix this. I can pay you back." David said calmly, "No, you can't." Mark leaned against a concrete pillar, running a trembling hand through his hair. "If I go to prison," he whispered, "Anna will lose everything. She won't survive without me." David looked at him with steady, unblinking eyes. "Then you should have thought about her before stealing from families and lying to everyone who trusted you." Mark's face twisted with fear and frustration. "You're the reason I'm losing her," he said bitterly. David answered softly, "No, Mark. You lost her the moment you gave up honesty." Mark's shoulders slumped as if his entire world had collapsed in front of him. He turned away, whispering something David couldn't quite hear. On the final day of testimony, the courtroom felt heavier than ever, filled with tension that clung to the air like humidity. The prosecutor delivered a powerful closing argument, reminding the jury of every forged signature, every stolen dollar, and every victim left broken by Mark's schemes. "This case," he said firmly, "is about accountability. Not excuses. Not pressure. Accountability." Mark sat stiffly beside his lawyer, staring down at his hands like they no longer belonged to him. When the prosecutor returned to his seat, the defense offered a weak, desperate plea for sympathy. But nothing, no speech, no excuses, could erase the mountain of evidence stacked against Mark. After closing arguments, the judge dismissed the jury to deliberate. David walked into the deliberation room with 11 other jurors, each wearing expressions of seriousness and fatigue. A woman named Linda, an accountant with sharp eyes, looked directly at David and said, "We all know you have strong opinions. But let's be fair and thorough." David nodded. "I agree. We'll go through every count." The jurors laid out notes, charts, and exhibits across the table. As they reviewed each piece of evidence, the truth remained clear and undeniable. Mark hadn't made a mistake, he'd made a choice. And his choices had consequences. 3 hours later, the jury reached a unanimous verdict. The room felt strangely quiet as David watched each hand rise during the final count. Guilty. 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 When they returned to the courtroom, Mark stood trembling as the verdict was read aloud. Anna cried softly in the gallery, covering her face with both hands. Mark looked directly at David, his eyes filled with accusation, fear, and something close to desperation. But David's expression remained calm, steady, and unreadable. The truth had spoken for itself. As the judge dismissed the court, David felt a mix of relief and sorrow settling deep inside him. The end was close, closer than anyone realized. When the bailiff took Mark into custody, his legs almost buckled under him. The handcuffs clicked around his wrists, echoing through the courtroom like a final sentence. Anna stood helplessly as he was led away, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. David remained seated for a moment, letting the weight of everything settle in his chest. He knew justice had been served, but he also knew the damage stretched far beyond bank accounts and legal documents. As he slowly stood, Anna approached him hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Dad, is this really the end?" David looked at her with tired eyes. "No, Anna. It's the beginning of something new." Outside the courthouse, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sidewalk. Reporters gathered near the steps, waiting to question anyone connected to the case. David and Anna slipped past the crowd quietly, neither wanting attention or sympathy. Anna wiped her eyes and said, "I should have listened to you from the start." David placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and replied, "Sometimes we learn the hardest lessons through the people we love." Anna nodded slowly, her voice trembling. "I don't know how to fix my life now." David answered softly, "One step at a time. And this time, choose honesty first." That evening, Anna packed her belongings into cardboard boxes while her friend Lisa helped her fold clothes and sort through drawers. The apartment felt empty, as if the walls themselves had given up on holding memories. "Are you sure you want to leave?" Lisa asked gently. Anna nodded. "I have to. Staying here feels like living inside a lie." She paused and looked at a framed photo of her wedding day, her smile bright, Mark's arm around her waist, both unaware of the storm ahead. Anna set the photo face down in the box. "I'm done pretending," she whispered. "I need to rebuild from the ground up." Meanwhile, David sat alone in his living room, the soft hum of the ceiling fan filling the silence. Part of him felt relieved that Mark's manipulations were finally over, but another part felt the ache of a father watching his family break apart. He stared at an old photo on the shelf, Anna holding a birthday cake at age 10, her smile wide and innocent. "Where did that little girl go?" he murmured. A knock on the door broke the quiet. It was Patty, holding a casserole dish. "Thought you might need company," she said warmly. David managed a grateful smile. "You always have good timing." Patty sat across from him at the kitchen table, both of them sharing dinner in comfortable silence. After a while, she said softly, "You know, justice doesn't always feel good at first. It's heavy. It's messy. But it's still justice." David rested his hands around his cup of tea. "I know. I just wish it didn't hurt Anna so much." Patty nodded gently. "She'll heal. She's stronger than she realizes." David sighed deeply, letting the weight of the past weeks settle fully. "I hope so," he said quietly. "Because this chapter is closed. She deserves a better one." The following morning, Anna arrived at David's house with 2 suitcases and red, tired eyes. "Dad," she said, standing in the doorway as if afraid she wasn't welcome. David stepped aside without hesitation. "Come in, Anna." She looked around the familiar home, the peeling yellow paint, the old turquoise bowl her mother once used, and her eyes softened with nostalgia. "I missed this place," she whispered. David nodded. "It's not perfect, but it's safe." Anna smiled weakly. "Safe sounds like heaven right now." She set her bags down and said, "I want to start over. And I want to start by fixing things with you." They sat together on the porch as the morning breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass. Anna wiped her eyes and whispered, "Dad, I know I hurt you. I chose silence when I should have spoken. I chose Mark when I should have chosen truth." David kept his gaze on the street ahead, letting her words sink in. "Anna," he said gently, "forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. But it opens the door to rebuild what we lost." She nodded slowly. "I don't expect it immediately. I just want to try." David placed a hand over hers. "Trying is the start. And I'll meet you there." Later that afternoon, David took Anna to the community garden a few blocks away. Rows of tomatoes, peppers, and herbs grew quietly under the warm sun. David knelt beside a small patch of soil and began planting new seedlings. "Why gardening?" Anna asked softly. David smiled faintly. "Because it teaches patience. It teaches care. And it shows us that even broken ground can grow something beautiful again." Anna knelt beside him, helping press the soil gently around each plant. For the first time in weeks, she felt a small spark of hope flicker inside her chest. "Maybe I can grow again too," she whispered. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, David and Anna sat on the porch swing, watching fireflies blink across the yard. Anna leaned her head on his shoulder and said, "Thank you for not giving up on me." David closed his eyes briefly, letting the moment settle into his heart. "You're my daughter," he said. "And even when you stumble, I'll always be here to help you stand again." Anna smiled softly through her tears. "I'm ready to move forward, Dad. Ready to rebuild my life." David nodded. "Then tomorrow we begin." The next morning arrived bright and calm, the sky washed clean by the early sun. David brewed 2 cups of coffee while Anna packed a list of jobs to apply for and apartments to visit. The house felt lighter, as if a long shadow had finally lifted. Before stepping outside, Anna hugged him tightly. "Dad, no matter what happens next, thank you." David hugged her back and whispered, "This is your new chapter, Anna. Make it honest. Make it strong." As they walked into the warm Texas morning, neither looked back at the courthouse or the pain behind them. The story had ended, but their healing had just begun. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me your thoughts in the comments below. I love reading your reactions.